I hate world building so much. Alright, now that that's out of the way, I get a bit too comfortable working within fandom spaces. So when I decided that I was going to fully commit to doing this whole fantasy idea of mine that had been banging around in my head for a while, I got scared to fully go through with it because I hate world building. And it's scary, and I feel like if I take anything from the real world, I'm being uncreative. I literally called the kingdom that the main character is from the Kingdom of Night. And it's literally only called the Kingdom of Night in the language of the Ashlin Empire, which is the other kingdom. Basically, it's this big continent that's split in half. So, while I draw Bora, who is the main character, I'm going to talk a bit about the Kingdom of Night, and I may do another video on the Ashlin Empire, just so you guys can see what a mess my world building is. So basically, the entirety of the island used to be the Kingdom of Night until about 1,300 years before the start of the canon, where the king of the Kingdom of Night died without a legitimate heir. And how the heirs work is, while monogamy is not normal in the Kingdom of Night, kings or the rulers can only have one consort, and only the children of the consorts can ascend the throne. Now, the consort can adopt either children of the harem, or they can adopt children that were fostered within the court. This can include the children of other nobles, or any children that have been fostered in the court in another sense. This is what happens with Bora. He is technically eligible to be adopted by the queen consort because he was raised in the court. He is a prince because he was future prince consort because he was engaged to the future crown prince Rakesh before he died. But that's not what makes him eligible to be adopted by the queen. He was raised in the court. So basically, this previous king dies. And so basically what happened was all of his previous children, mostly sons, the Kingdom of Night, you can have either gender ascend the throne. There really isn't male preference in the Kingdom of Night, technically. Hubris is gonna hubris. But, they raised armies, and they're all fighting each other, and that allowed people to come and invade, and they were so, focused fighting each other, trying to win the throne of the Kingdom of Night, that they did not realize that these people had come and, set up shop on the northern part of their island, and so the Ashlin Empire has been a thorn on their side, and they've just been fighting for 1,300 years, and I kind of really like it. That's the one part of the history that I really, really like, is there's a reason for the Ashlin Empire to be there, and there's a reason for them to be constantly in conflict with the Kingdom of Night. The Kingdom of Night, what they have now is they've got the most, fertile coastlines of the entire island. Most of the northern part of the island, where the Ashlin Empire ended up, is a lot of mountains and a lot of forests. They really don't have a whole lot of coast and not a whole good port system. The Kingdom of Night actually has a lot of outside trade with the rest of the world. The Ashin Empire doesn't. So they may not have a lot of good forests and hunting opportunities, but what the Kingdom of Night does have is a lot of good beaches, foreign export, and farmland. So that just kind of balances it out, whereas the Ashlin Empire is a lot more, they've got more minerals and more ores. So there is some trade going on between the two kingdoms that is sort of necessary. They've sort of, over 1,300 years, settled into a sort of new normal, where they can kind of function, but they've also been at war for a whole long time. Since I'm not really good at names and shit, I mostly split the world in half. Most of Europe is Ashlin Empire, and then Asia, the Middle East, is the Kingdom of Night. It just worked out better that way. just to split down the middle, because it gave a nice split as far as the names go, where if you heard someone call, Catherine, you're like, okay, that's the Ashlin Empire. But if you heard someone named Rakesh, Bora, you would think, yeah, that's the Kingdom of Night. And it worked really well for me, especially since I've already borrowed a bunch from, the Ottoman Empire and the Chinese, palace systems for, like, the harems and stuff. I borrowed some of that for the Kingdom of Night, just because I thought it'd be interesting. I don't see a whole lot of... When you do medieval fantasy, you really don't see people do a lot with harems. It's mostly since people base medieval fantasy, medieval, on medieval, Britain and France and shit. And when I say medieval, I mean, like kings and knights, and I don't necessarily mean in the medieval period. And when it's just not very common that they include it, and I just wanted to, because it also puts a bit of contrast between the two kingdoms, especially since, basically the religion of the Ashlin Empire is basically just discount Catholicism. I just stole Catholicism. Like I said, I suck at world building, but I also wanted there to be some tension there, and the Kingdom of Night is mostly pagan, and I went off the lunar system since it's one of the oldest, visual things we've had. People doing shit with the stars and the moon have been existed for centuries, and they believe that basically the world of the living and the world of the dead are separated by a veil, and how thick the veil is contrasted by the moon. So, for example, a new moon, the veil is at its thickest because you cannot see the moon at all. The moon... And then full moon is when it's at its thinnest. I may have that switched around. I've got to check my notes. But yeah. I actually check my notes on a lot, and I've been recording way past the speed paint. Fuck. This may have to be a part 2. I have a whole lot, and I need to actually write more shit down. Like, and a lot of shit, like the rank system for nobles was actually borrowed from the Ashlin Empire. Like, they have things like lords, dukes, knights. That all came from the Ashlin Empire. Like, they've been at war for 1,300 years, but they can borrow shit. They borrow shit from each other with no shame. And also, the Kingdom of Night speaks fluently both their language, which I call Moonscript, and Kingdom of Night language, which is just and the Ashlin Empire language, which is just discount English. Because there's got to be a language that the story is told in somehow, and I speak English. But but Ashlin Empire nobles would never be caught speaking at the Kingdom of Night, would never be caught speaking Moonscript. They don't even know it. They don't bother to learn it. So there is sort of this divide where the Kingdom of Night nobles are being more respectful to the Ashlin Empire than they probably deserve, in a sense. So, for example, Bora spends a good portion of his story in the Ashlin Empire, and he was born in the Ashlin Empire. He came to the Kingdom of Night as a religious refugee. He was found as a 6-year-old child in a monastery. He was basically being tortured, and the king at the time, King Felix, brought him back to live in the Kingdom of Night, and he was raised in the court. So his first language is actually Ashlin Empire, is the language of the Ashlin Empire. But he did pick up Moonscript very easily because he was very young, and it is the language he is more comfortable in. By the time, he's 16 and he returns to the Ashlin Empire, he goes back on a revenge quest to avenge Rakesh. He is much more comfortable in Moonscript, and he, at this point, has also developed a bit of an accent that he has to hide while in the Ashlin Empire, because he may look physically like, okay, you can see in the bone structure, yeah, you were born in the Ashlin Empire and not the Kingdom of Night, but you have this Kingdom of Night accent that immediately, singles you out as being from the Kingdom of Night, and depending on where you are in the kingdom, that's not a good thing to be. Because how bloody the wars have been, there's people who hold grudges, and there is a point in the story where he actually, in his travels, comes across the monastery where he is being held, and he learns that King Felix actually burned it down, and he has to get away very, very quickly because the villagers around do not like anyone from the Kingdom of Night. They don't know that Bora was one of the people who was in the monastery at the time. They just hear his accent because he is so distraught. He realizes where he is, and he cannot mask his accent at the time, and his companions have to really quickly spirit him away before he's, like, lynched, because it's bad. I've been having way too much fun with this series because, I don't know, I'm uncomfortable with world building. I hate it, but at the same time, I've been having fun with it once I stopped trying to be original and I just had fun. So I think I'll talk more about this going forward.